Well, with the election just days away, the Department of Justice is working to make sure there is no voter fraud or crimes committed at the polls. So how is it doing that, and what do you need to know? I spoke with Assistant U.S. Attorney Mac Jenkins. Mac, thanks so much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
First off, what is the Department of Justice doing to ensure that there is no election fraud?
Sure, very good and timely question. The answer is, of course, complicated, but I'll simplify it by saying we're doing a lot of things. So I'm the chief of our public corruption and civil rights section in Los Angeles, which covers Palm Springs, the Central District. We have appointed 2 district elections officers. Those are federal prosecutors, Lindsay Greer-Dotson, Tom Rabarczyk, whose job it is right now, and frankly, since the summer, is to help answer that question. And so the way we're doing it is on multi-front. A lot of federal agency cooperation with local agencies. We coordinate with DC, our sort of the mothership, as we call it, in Department of Justice in DC. And we and the FBI as the lead agency coordinating for all the different potentials that each election cycle bring. But this current one certainly seems to have a heightened concern about lots of them. And so we have been in significant training for those individuals who are involved in monitoring. There's been a lot of a cyber component. Both the U.S. Attorney's Office and FBI have cyber divisions that are engaged to ensure that our elections are safe and fair and protected from fraud and interference, be that domestic or foreign.
What are some examples of election fraud or voting rights violations that people need to be aware of?
Certainly. I think particularly in any election, but unfortunately this one seems to have heightened the concerns on both. I'll say really there's 3 buckets of concerns. One, as you mentioned, is when you go to the poll, your actual ability to physically, if you're going in person, to go vote. You want to be free from interference, free from intimidation, obviously free from violence for trying to utilize your most fundamental American right, that is the right to vote. So generally, people should not be getting in your way in any sort of measure, by any sort of tactic. Photographs, asking you questions that don't relate to sort of who you are and where you're going to vote. There are trained poll workers, people are certified to be there, that know what to do, what questions to ask. And people should just be on the lookout for anyone who doesn't seem like they should be there, because they probably shouldn't. And so that's something we train, work with local registrar offices, who's supposed to be there, how many feet may people be close in relation to the voting centers. And so the number one thing right now, I think, is people are just concerned that if they go and vote, can they do it? Can it be maybe a long line? It may be boring like it often is, but can they just do it free of harm or intimidation or threats, or that someone's going to take their picture or otherwise harass them? And so both the locals and the FBI are in coordination to, number one, just deter that type of activity. And that's one of the messages we've been sending out is you can be very fond of the electoral process, but if you're not supposed to be there and you're not going to vote, don't show up at the polls, because you may find yourself inadvertently committing a federal crime by interfering with others' ability to have their right day at the polls, have their day at the polls. Fraud, it's always, we always look at, and thankfully in the Central District has not been a significant concern, but is always something we pay attention to. Are you eligible to vote? Should you be voting in the first place? You can't vote twice, also a federal crime during a federal election. People voting in the names of another. All of those are sort of, we put in the fraud bucket. And then the third bucket is more on the cyber front. And we have, that's the one people have been hearing about for years and is obviously a very significant concern, especially foreign interference through hacking. And so again, we have our National Security Division engaged, both here at the U.S. Attorney's Office, but also with the FBI, who've been monitoring that for, frankly, years. So those are the 3 buckets that we are concerned with, but hopefully the public shouldn't be. That is our job. We take it very seriously. We've been taking it very seriously. And ideally, we want people to know that we are paying attention. We have been working on these things, so they don't have to worry about those 3 things. That's our job.
After the election is over, how does the Department of Justice ensure that the results are accurate?
Yeah, a very, again, good but difficult question. So really, we don't have a role in sort of counting votes per se, and that's still the number one way. Someone's going to count them up, the registrars, the reporting mechanisms. We're sort of outside the lane of the Department of Justice. But we have both the ability and intelligence and responsibility to make the appropriate people aware if we see there were some concerns at a certain voting poll, or if there were people who complained about interference at certain voting places. If we see sort of intelligence that there were some unexpected irregularities in some electronic portion of the voting, then we get that information to the people whose job it is then to take further steps. But so we're sort of in the monitoring and ensuring, I'd say, business. And that's what we plan to do. And we've been doing, frankly, for each electoral cycle.
How concerned are you that there may be some major issues with this election?
I would say I'm not concerned, but I would say we are very interested in being prepared and having a lot of planning and having, frankly, a lot of teamwork to ensure we prepare for the worst case scenario. And so we do that each year. And so that's why I'm not concerned, because it's just part of our job to prepare for that worst case scenario. But I would say certainly we've increased the resources that we've dedicated. There's been more preparation. There's been more planning. There's more interagency teamwork going on right now and starting at an earlier date. So we're sort of putting our resources where other people's concerns are by ideally, once the election is over, it will be over. And that's sort of our goal. And again, it'll be sort of anticlimactic. It'll be meaningful. People will get to vote. It'll be impactful. It'll be historic for some people, but ultimately it'll be anticlimactic because it'll just be like any other vote. That's our goal. And we're going to try to do our best to make sure that's how people feel afterwards as well.
Here in Riverside County, have you heard of any issues leading up to Election Day, or are you anticipating any issues here on Election Day?
Yeah, thankfully in the Central District, which covers Riverside, we have not heard anything, I would say, unusual or out of the ordinary that we don't hear any federal election cycle. We've been grateful, and of course, I don't want to jinx it by saying anything that would cause that to occur, but thankfully we haven't heard a lot and we haven't seen a lot. And we don't expect that to change. That's why we are, again, increasing our focus and resources, not because of things necessarily we heard or even are concerned about, but just because it is something that people rightfully, or to some ways it's just perception, some ways it may be exaggerated, but people are very concerned this electoral cycle. And again, our job is to assuage that concern and let them know that that's our job to take care of that so they can vote and be confident with the results afterwards. And Riverside is the same as the other districts, the other 7 counties we cover, that we're preparing for everything, but we're not overly concerned about any specific outlier or significant event to occur at this point.
And finally, if people see something or suspect something suspicious, what do they need to do?
Yes, absolutely. So we have issued a press release, of which I will give the phone number yes. There's a federal task force and command post the day of the election. People see something, definitely say something. Call 310-477-6565. That's 310-477-6565. That is the FBI number that will go directly to the command post on Election Day. Definitely report it. If it's a intimidation, potential physical harm situation, always still 911. There will be locals who will also LAPD and our local counterparts are ready to respond. Definitely just call 911. If people want to write in something, maybe they're not sure, maybe they don't feel comfortable calling, I'll give you an email address. That is voting, VOTING, .section, SECTION, at USDOJ.gov. So voting.section at USDOJ.gov. Please do reach out. Feel free, no matter how small. Again, we got a lot of people oriented towards this. So if we get a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, we're ready. And it'll give those people something to do on Election Day. So please take us up on that offer.
All right, Mac, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.